Rain stitched the windows with a whisper while Nora sorted socks into pairs. The spin cycle droned like an engine, steadying her hands until she reached Daniel's navy coat. It felt heavier than memory, damp at the hem, smelling faintly of cedar. Her fingers slipped into the inner pocket and found paper, stiff, glossy, secret. She unfolded the photo halfway, then fully, as if exposure might dull its sting. A lipstick smear dragged across another woman's smile. Daniel's arm showed at the frame's edge, familiar as a signature. She told herself it could be a prank from an office party, a swap of coats, an accident of light. She told herself not to become the woman she once was. Suspicious, inventing. Storms from mist. She placed the photo on the washer lid, moved it, then hid it beneath a towel only she would fold. The house, faithful in its routines, felt abruptly conspiratorial. The kettle whistled too sharply. The clock clicked like a metronome. To panic, she wiped the lipstick with the corner of her sleeve. It only bloomed wider. A red confession refusing to vanish. In the hallway mirror, she looked like a witness who hadn't learned what she had witnessed. Afternoon poured into evening. She cooked, plated, cleaned, remembered to laugh at the moments when Daniel called to say he'd be late. After midnight, the room settled, but her ribs did not. Rain thinned to a hush. She slid the photo beneath her pillow like a talisman against dreams. Beside her, the nightstand glowed with a patient rectangle. It held answers in a tongue she'd never been allowed to speak. She watched the green pulse and felt the question harden inside her. Insomnia gathered its tools. No more guessing. At 2 a.m., she'd learned the language of his password. The photo under her pillow had been a stone all night, pressing into dreams she couldn't escape. By 2 in the morning, Rain had slowed to a whisper, but Nora's heart refused to quiet. Daniel lay beside her, breathing in the deep rhythm of someone untroubled, someone untouched by suspicion. She stared at the green glow of his phone, left to charge on the nightstand, as if it were a lighthouse pointing the way through fog. Her hand trembled as she reached for it, pausing when his body shifted. She counted his breaths, waited for them to steady again, then drew the device close. The lock screen greeted her like a challenge. For years she had known the numbers, anniversaries, birthdays, the kind of small intimacies spouses shared. He had changed it. She tried twice, failed, and then remembered the new garage code he had set last spring. The phone opened. The room seemed to tilt. A message thread named E floated to the top, innocuous at a glance. She tapped it, and her chest constricted. Words scrolled upward, the kind of tenderness Daniel once reserved only for her. You looked beautiful. Tonight, I booked the room again, same time, same place. Each promise, each hotel pin sliced her thinner. The affection in those sentences was more than physical. It was devotion she hadn't felt in years. The silence of the room grew unbearable. She pressed the phone to her chest, eyes burning, when Daniel stirred beside her. His eyelids fluttered, and in a voice thick with sleep he murmured, "What are you doing?" Panic surged. She whispered, "Nothing." He mumbled, "You're imagining things again," and rolled away, leaving her clutching proof that felt like a dream. The glow of the screen faded, but her doubt did not. If she was imagining, why did the words feel heavier than truth? The question would not release her, carrying her into the next day, toward a voice she couldn't ignore. The next morning unfolded in a haze. Nora moved through the kitchen, brewing. Coffee she didn't drink, slicing fruit she didn't taste. The phone lay on the counter, heavy with silence, the thread with E seared into her memory. Every word of it pressed on her chest like a bruise. By late afternoon, with Daniel at work and the rain finally gone, she gave in to the weight. She dialed the number from the messages, each ring pulling her tighter into a knot. On the fourth ring, a woman's voice answered. Soft, startled. Then silence. Nora froze, ready to speak, but before she could form a word, the line went dead, hung up as if the sound of her breath had burned. The dial tone returned, flat and merciless, and for a moment Nora thought the world had shifted. She stood staring at the phone, listening to the static in her head that refused to clear. When Daniel returned that evening, she confronted him. She wanted answers. Instead, she received theater. He laughed first, then frowned, then folded his arms like a man wrongly accused. "You've done this before, Nora," he said, voice low with practiced patience. "Remember the neighbor? The text you thought meant something? You almost destroyed us with that." His words spun her past against her present, reshaping memory until she questioned the sharpness of her own instincts. She argued back, but each sentence wilted under his counter. The lipstick photo became a misunderstanding. The messages became jokes between colleagues. The phone call, a telemarketer she had twisted into betrayal. By the time the clock touched midnight, the fight had cooled into a brittle peace, one where silence meant surrender rather than resolution. Nora lay in bed, colder than the sheets could explain, her body next to Daniel's but her mind elsewhere. She closed her eyes, but the woman's voice echoed. Tomorrow, she thought. She needed proof no argument could bend. Somewhere beyond the static, the truth was waiting to answer. The morning after their brittle truce, Nora resolved to stay silent, but silence rotted inside her like spoiled fruit. Daniel, ever perceptive when it came to controlling the temperature of their marriage, surprised her with an invitation. Dinner at La Brise, the restaurant they had once saved for anniversaries. His voice on the phone was all smooth edges. "Let me make this right." It felt less like an apology and more like a strategy. By evening, the restaurant glowed with low amber light. The scent of rosemary and butter lingered in the air, and couples leaned close in polished reflections. Daniel pulled out her chair with the precision of a man aware of eyes on him. He ordered wine before she had the chance to refuse, then filled the silence with anecdotes about work, about clients, about anything but the one thing thrumming between them. Nora waited until the plates arrived, until the candle flame softened, his face until the room around them blurred into a hum. Then she slid the folded photo onto the table, beside his glass, her hand steady only because she forced it to be. "Explain this," she said, voice barely louder than the music overhead. Daniel looked down, blinked once, and then smiled. The kind of smile sharpened for disarming. "Office prank," he said smoothly. "You know how marketing gets after hours." He reached for his phone and scrolled through his calendar. "See? Client dinner, that night, here's the timestamp." He angled the screen toward her as though proof could be summoned with pixels and jargon. Each word, each laugh, each logical thread tightened a net around her doubts, transforming them into shame. She recognized the maneuver, gaslighting polished to art, but still felt herself wavering. She cut her steak into tiny pieces, each bite tasting of iron. Her eyes flicked between the photo, the calendar, and his unshakable composure. The room felt airless. By the time dessert menus appeared, the photo had vanished back into her purse, his narrative planted like weeds in her mind. The check arrived before the truth did, leaving her with the metallic aftertaste of questions unanswered. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would find something harder than words to argue with. Proof that couldn't be charmed away. The promise she made to herself after the dinner clung like smoke. Proof, undeniable and solid. Nora spent hours piecing through the digital crumbs Daniel had overlooked. His phone held a location pin buried in an email confirmation, coordinates outside the city, attached to a date and time that matched the soft promises from E. It was almost too neat, as if daring her to follow. She told herself she wouldn't. That obsession was a trap. Yet when dusk fell, she was already steering the car toward the highway. The motel was the kind of place people forgot on purpose. Neon buzzed in uneven rhythm, and the parking lot was scattered with cars whose owners had reasons to hide. Nora parked 2 rows away and killed the engine, her pulse louder than the quiet country night. Room 17's curtain glowed faint amber. She fixed her eyes on it, breath shallow, waiting. Minutes stretched until the door opened. A woman stepped out, red dress clinging like defiance. She was younger than Nora expected, though not untouched by wear. Elise. Nora knew her name without hearing it. The way she smoothed her hair, the way her heels clicked on the concrete, it all reeked of intimacy rehearsed in secret. Nora's throat went dry as Elise paused by the soda machine. fishing for change. That was when their eyes met. The glance lasted less than a breath, but landed like impact. Elise's face flickered. First guilt, then fear, then something unspoken. That seemed almost like recognition. Nora gripped the steering wheel, nails cutting into her palms, but made no move to speak. To confront here would be to break something she wasn't yet ready to shatter. She memorized everything instead. The crimson of the dress, the peeling paint on the door, the low hum of the soda machine filling the air like static. Elise turned, quickly slipped into her car, and drove off without looking back. Nora stayed behind, heart hammering, staring at room 17. Proof had a face now, and it was enough to push her deeper into the storm. By the time she pulled away, she already knew. The confrontation waiting at home would not end quietly. Nora's hand still smelled faintly of gasoline from the drive. The motel's neon burned into her eyes. Proof had a face now, and it marched her straight into the kitchen where Daniel sat scrolling through his phone, casual as if nothing fractured. Their lives. She dropped her purse on the counter with a thud that made him look up. Who is she? The question cracked the air sharper than glass. Daniel blinked, confusion morphing too quickly into irritation. Not this again, he muttered, standing. He reached for her wrist when she shoved the photo into his chest, the crumpled evidence of lipstick and lies. His grip was firm, practiced. Something inside her snapped. With her free hand, she seized the vase from the table, a wedding gift once filled with lilies, and swung. The ceramic shattered against his temple in a sickening crack. Pieces skittered across the floor like startled insects. Daniel staggered back, blood beating red against his skin. The silence that followed was heavier than the blow. Both froze, breath locked in their throats. Daniel lifted trembling fingers to the wound, staring at the crimson tips. His voice was soft, almost reverent, when he whispered, "Look what you've done." It wasn't accusation. It was verdict. Nora's chest heaved. She wanted to scream, to justify, to hurl every betrayal back at him. But instead she moved mechanically, fetching the first aid kit from under the sink. Her hands trembled as she pressed gauze against his temple, taping the wound in strips that clung awkwardly. The kitchen floor sparkled with shards, silent witnesses neither dared mention. When it was done, Daniel sat back, jaw tight, watching her with an expression she couldn't read, fear, calculation, or both. She wiped her palms on her jeans, smearing streaks of red that weren't hers. They said nothing more that night. They couldn't. The house itself seemed to listen, walls swelling with the weight of unsaid things. By morning, the news would carry its own shattering sound, louder than any vase. News that another woman's blood had been spilled, this time by the river. Morning broke with a chill that crept into Nora's bones before she even switched on the news. The anchor's voice cut through the hum of the high coffee maker. The body of a woman has been discovered near the East River bank. Authorities report blunt force trauma. No personal belongings recovered at the scene. A blurred image filled the screen. Yellow tape, flashing lights, and the outline of something covered. Nora's cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the counter. She didn't need the reporter to say the name. She already knew Elise, the red dress. The eyes that had met hers by the motel machine. Her pulse quickened, echoing the vase's shatter from the night before. Only this sound was final, irreversible. She turned to Daniel, who stood behind her, watching the screen too intently. His face was unreadable, as though already rehearsing a role. By late morning, the knock came. Detective Harper Quinn introduced himself at the door, tall, calm, polite, but not soft. He stepped inside with the practiced ease of someone who measured not just words, but silences. His eyes moved over the kitchen, pausing on the faint scratches in the floor, the faint trace of something red by the sink Nora hadn't seen before. The home seemed to exhale secrets, and Harper inhaled them all. They sat across from him, Nora clutching her hands together, Daniel leaning back like a man certain of control. Harper's questions came gently at first. Where they were last night, if they knew the victim, if they recognized the photograph the police had recovered from Elise's belongings. Then his gaze settled on Nora. Did you know Elise? The question lingered like a blade. Nora's breath stuttered. A simple yes would open a door she wasn't ready to walk through. A no would lock her inside her own lie. She hesitated, throat closing. Harper watched her. Not pressing, not accusing, simply observing as though silence itself was an answer. Daniel interjected quickly, deflecting, weaving alibis in measured tones. Nora sat frozen, the question still lodged inside her. The detective made a note in his book, then rose with a nod, leaving the quiet heavier than before. When the door closed, Nora could still hear the echo of his question. She realized that truth, whichever way she turned it, would cost her. And soon, someone would start unearthing her past to measure that cost. Detective Harper's return visit carried a different weight. He arrived with papers tucked neatly under his arm, the kind that didn't need flourish to wound. Nora sat rigid at the kitchen table as he laid them down, a restraining order from more than a decade ago. She recognized the faded ink before he spoke. Another man. Another betrayal. Another midnight when she had grabbed too hard, shouted too long, left marks that the court recorded even when her heart wanted to forget. History has a way of echoing, Harper said evenly, not unkind but not merciful either. His eyes searched, hers noting every flicker of guilt and defiance. Daniel, seated beside her with his bandaged temple still visible, leaned forward. She was young, he said quickly, voice warm, protective. We all make mistakes. She's not that woman. Anymore. His hand brushed hers as if to anchor her, but the gesture felt rehearsed, an actor hitting his mark. When Harper left, Nora fled to the porch and called Sophie, her only refuge outside the walls of her marriage. Sophie's voice crackled through. The line, steady as always. Listen to me, Nora. They'll make you the story if you let them. You have to keep your head. You didn't kill that girl, but if you keep carrying this alone, they'll convince the world otherwise. Nora pressed the phone to her ear until her hand ached, but Sophie's warning sank deeper than comfort ever could. Inside, Daniel played his role flawlessly. He made tea for Harper before he left, spoke gently about Nora's insomnia, even joked about his bandaged wound as though it were a badge of devotion. His charm curved the atmosphere in his favor, casting himself as the patient husband with a difficult wife. Nora stood at the doorway, watching him pour the tea, watching Harper jot another note. She realized then that Daniel's wound had become his shield, a convenient halo of harm that disguised the storm beneath. And if Harper kept digging, she feared the storm would no longer be Daniel's alone. It would consume her past and chain it to Elise's death. Tomorrow, she knew, the walls would whisper again, and this time, the whispers would come with proof that could not be buried. By the next evening, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers that traveled faster than facts. Mr. Clark, the retiree across the street, knocked on Nora's door with an apologetic smile and a flash drive clutched in his hand. "Thought you should know," he said, his voice hushed, as if delivering contraband. His doorbell camera had caught something at 11:12 p.m. the night Elise died. Nora watched the grainy footage on his laptop, her stomach twisting. The screen showed only fragments. A woman in a red dress walking past, the shimmer of a clutch catching the porch light. The frame never captured her face, only a shoulder, the swish of fabric, the suggestion of hurried steps. Nora's breath, snagged as recognition pricked, though logic told her she couldn't be certain. Elise, it had to be. But when the clip leaked online, the internet decided otherwise. Forums, neighborhood groups, even anonymous comments branded it Nora. They zoomed in, compared silhouettes, spun theories like threads of a noose. A shadow became evidence. A glitter of metal became motive. Strangers who didn't know her face claimed they recognized her posture. Guilt was manufactured in pixels. Detective Harper studied the footage more carefully. He paused, rewound, and finally leaned back with a measured breath. "The height's off," he said. "This woman's taller than you by at least 2 inches. The stride is longer too." His words should have been a shield, but gossip outran precision. What Harper noted in caution, The public devoured uncertainty. Daniel, meanwhile, played his role perfectly. "Ignore them," he told Nora, voice smooth, protective. "People just want a story." Yet his eyes lingered too long on the screen, as if calculating how much the image could be bent and toward whose ruin. Nora closed the laptop, pulse hammering. Proof had turned to smoke again, and smoke was enough to choke her. She sensed that somewhere out there lay a truth harder than shadows, something recorded that could not be erased. By the time Harper left, the silence between husband and wife was taut as wire, vibrating with the unspoken. Tomorrow, she knew, that silence would break when a voice returned, one that Daniel had meant to vanish. The day after the ring footage stirred the neighborhood into frenzy, Detective Harper returned, this time carrying his laptop with the gravity of someone bringing evidence that mattered. He set it on the table, fingers steady as he opened a file. "This," he said, "was recovered from Elise's phone." Nora leaned in, pulse pounding, Daniel shifting just enough to place himself between them. The audio hissed, then a voice filled the kitchen. Daniel's, taut and low, stripped of the smooth charm he used so freely. "End this or I will." The menace in those words clung like smoke. Nora flinched, the sound slicing deeper because it was so familiar, yet revealed a side of him she had long suspected but never heard recorded. Daniel reacted quickly. "That's taken out of context," he insisted, a hollow laugh escaping. "We argued yes, but threats? Come on, Harper, you know how recordings can be twisted." His hand brushed Nora's shoulder as though to tether her, but she stiffened beneath it. The detective's eyes noted the gesture without comment, clicking instead to the second file. This one was colder. Transaction logs, cash withdrawals traced. Over weeks, all in amounts just below suspicion. Each tied to a burner phone number. Harper revealed cell tower pings that placed that burner near the river on the night Elise died. Daniel's jaw tightened, his practiced calm unraveling at the edges. Nora listened twice, unable to stop herself, the way one presses a cracked tooth, knowing it will hurt. Each replay was confirmation. Her husband's voice wasn't just a warning. It was evidence. The man across from her wasn't simply unfaithful. He was cornered by his own words. When Harper closed the laptop, silence pooled heavy around them. Daniel leaned forward, forcing a smile, his voice soft but strained. "Nora, you don't believe this, do you?" It was plea and command at once. She said nothing because the sound of his voice lingered in her skull, impossible to delete. And in that silence, she knew the next question would not be hers to ask. It would be Harper's, and it would pin Daniel to the night by the river. The knock of inevitability came not from Harper this time, but from paperwork, neat and merciless. Toll records, timestamps, and surveillance stills, proof that Daniel's car had crossed the bridge toward the river during the narrow window Elise had died. Nora read the report with her lips pressed thin, while Daniel hovered, restless, pacing, the kitchen like an animal trapped in too small a cage. When Harper left, the house turned suffocating. Daniel slammed the report onto the counter, voice breaking into a plea. "They've got it wrong, Nora. You know I was here, hurt, bleeding. You bandaged me yourself." His hand brushed the fading wound on his temple, that halo he had worn so well. "You're the only one who can say it. Tell them I never left." Nora stared at him, her throat dry. He moved closer, softer now, desperation painting his words. "I'll go to counseling. I'll change, I swear. Accountability, therapy, whatever you want. Just please, all you have to do is say I was here, that's all." The echo of Elise's eyes in the motel parking lot seared into her mind. Proof, undeniable, living and breathing. Now gone. Nora realized Daniel wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking her to erase Elise's absence by fabricating his presence. The bandage she'd pressed to his head had tethered her to him, blurred the lines between care and complicity. She had mistaken his need for love, his fragility for truth. Her silence stretched, and in it she heard the shape of her blindness. She hadn't been his wife that night. She had been his alibi waiting to be written. The kitchen light hummed, Above them, harsh and unflinching. Daniel's hand closed around hers, tighter than comfort. "You owe me this," he whispered. The charm gone, the command revealed. Nora pulled her hand free, the fracture widening between them. She saw the hour he couldn't explain, and for the first time she knew it would break them. Tomorrow she would no longer be asked for silence. She would be asked for truth with the lake as witness. The lake had always been their place. Years earlier, beneath an arch of pale blossoms, Nora and Daniel had promised each other forever. Now, twilight draped the water in bruised shades of purple and gray, the air colder than memory. Daniel stood near the dock, hands buried in his coat pockets, eyes flicking nervously to the tree line. Nora approached slowly, her footsteps crunching on gravel, carrying the weight of every betrayal, every unanswered question. Detective Harper waited at a distance, blending into the shadows, watchful but silent. Nora felt his presence like a safety net. Though she knew if she fell, it would still hurt. Daniel tried first. "You don't have to say anything to them," he murmured, voice breaking into something almost tender. "You know me, Nora. You know I couldn't." She cut him off. "Stop." Her voice was firm, clearer than it had been in weeks. "I won't lie. Not for you." The words struck him harder than any vase had. His composure fractured, lips trembling before twisting into a snarl. "You don't understand," he hissed, the polished mask gone. His voice dropped, thick with desperation. She was going to tell. She threatened everything. Us, my work, my life. I couldn't let her. I made it stop. The confession slid from him like oil, staining the air, impossible to take back. For a moment, silence pressed down, broken only by the soft lapping of water against the dock. Nora's chest tightened. The man she once loved had finally named himself. From the shadows, Harper stepped forward. The sound of his radio crackled softly, followed by the distant wail of sirens growing closer, threading into the dusk. Daniel's eyes darted wildly, but his shoulders slumped, defeat soaking into him as Harper's voice was calm but final. "Daniel Carter, you're under arrest." Nora didn't move. She watched the ripples spreading across the lake, remembering vows made here and broken beyond repair. Justice had come, but it was a justice that cost her the life she had built, the love she once clung to. As the sirens softened into the evening, Nora understood. Truth had freed her, but freedom was not the same as peace.